want to make sure is our technology working? Video, capability, audio? Okay, great. Well, welcome to the Tuesday staff meeting. And I'm Commissioner Alicia Reese, Vice President of the Commission. And I'm going to ask each person to introduce themselves.
Lisa Daria, Deputy Clerk.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Driehaus.
Jeff Alito, County Administrator.
And I'd like to make a motion to excuse Hamilton County Commission President Stephanie Dumas, still recovering from COVID.
Second?
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Driehaus.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to get right to it. We are starting today at 1:30. We had a great event called the State of Metro that Commissioner Driehaus and myself was at. And United States Senator Sherrod Brown, and he talked about a lot of money, so we wanted to be in the room to make sure that money comes to Hamilton County. And just want to give a congratulations to Daryl and his team for that. And we had a little fire before we went in there, so it was running a little bit behind. So we moved our meeting back to 1:30 so we could be in the room with the federal folks that have the grants available for Metro. So that's why we're starting at 1:30. Our first item on the agenda today is the introduction of Common Pleas reentry docket. And we've got Director Trina Jackson and Judge Wendy Cross. So I don't know if you want Judge Cross to introduce? Okay, you're not going to introduce her with all her great accolades, but come on forward, Judge Wendy Cross from Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas.
Good afternoon to you, Commissioner Reese, Commissioner Driehaus, and to the county commissioners, and Commissioner Dumas in her absence. Thank you so very much for this time just to introduce our initiative with the Hamilton County reentry docket. So there is a growing realization across our country that releasing offenders, individuals from prison without any type of supportive measures just basically perpetuates the revolving prison door. And so our court, Hamilton County Common Pleas Court, matter of fact, I'll just say our county has always been responsive to the needs of the people in our community. And so we put our heads together and we have introduced the Hamilton County reentry docket. Now, according to the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, in 2021, there were almost 43,000 people in prison in the state of Ohio. 43,000. I think that number has gone up just a little bit by a couple of thousand for 2022. ODRC operates 27 prisons in our state, and 72% of them are violent offenders. But there is a fraction, a 27% that are non-violent offenders. Our reentry docket will target those non-violent offenders. Now, we put on our slide the number of inmates with felony convictions. The first time felony convictions is about almost 1,200 people in the prisons. Second time felony convictions, almost 2,000. And then third time is almost 4,371. So not only is this effort and this initiative a feel-good, but based on the data, we know that it's going to be a huge cost savings to not only the state of Ohio, but Hamilton County. So it costs $26,000 a year just to house one inmate in our local county jail. And it costs a little bit more than that, $26,365 a year for one inmate in our prisons around the state. So the average person that spends time in a Ohio prison is about 2.5 years. So when you calculate how much it costs per year, and we just did an average 2.5 years or 30 months, it's $65,000 to house someone in our Ohio prisons. What our program will do will target first-time offenders, non-violent offenders, release them from prison, and be a cost savings to the county and to our state by at least $39,000 per person, per year. So what is this whole docket about? Well, the reentry docket is a program that's going to manage the return of to the community of individuals being released from prison. Now, we're going to do that using the authority of the court to supervise them and to marshal resources to support them. We will supervise them with graduated sanctions and positive reinforcements. Why are we doing this? The expectation is that the focus on reentry issues in the court will help reduce recidivism rates, reduce that revolving prison door, provide cost-effective measures to the state and taxpayers, so save money for our county and our state. And additionally, to encourage a broad-based coalition to support the successful reintegration of members back into the community. That's the humanity part of it, seeing people for who they are and helping them come back into the community. How are we going to do this? We're going to do it with the Welcome Home Reentry Docket, and that's what we're calling it, the Welcome Home Reentry Docket. It will be a permissive program in which the judge will approve judicial release. Now, I stand here as one judge, but I stand here with all 16 of the Common Pleas judges who are in support of this effort. It was a unanimous vote to do this. And so we all are on the same page that this is the way we want to bring people back into our community, because at the end of the day, they're coming back anyway. They're coming back to our community anyway. So this way, we'll have measures in place to not only support them, but to supervise them as they're coming back. So this is a map of Ohio, and we got this from the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. So we're going to be targeting the southern half of the state. Those are all the prisons in the state of Ohio. There are reentry courts in the northern part of the state, but there aren't any in the southern eastern part of the state, like Hamilton County. This will be our first one. There are some in, and we'll talk to you about that, Summit County, Lucas County, Stark County, but that's about it as far as reentry programs. So Hamilton County is joining our sister counties to provide this initiative. I will tell you, we have been doing our due diligence to get this program to make it wildly successful. And what we've been doing is, the first thing we did is we have done prison tours. We have gone to these prisons listed on the slide. We've already been to Chillicothe and Lebanon and Madison and Noble and all of these prisons. And what we do is we actually go into the prison and we introduce this program and bring applications. What I wanted to do was to have the inmates understand our program from us. So not only did I go into the prisons to do this, my whole team did. So not only did Ms. Jackson, she went on every prison tour, and our dedicated probation officer, she went with us. And also our Assistant Chief of Probation, Ms. Tiana Johnson, she went with us to all these prisons so that we can present this program ourselves. And I tell you, it has been a wonderfully received, not only by the wardens, but by the unit managers and the case managers, and obviously the inmates. They are very excited to see a judge and the assistant chief of probation and the probation officer who will supervise them and the Office of Reentry coming into where they are and speaking about this program. We've also done a focus group. We did a focus group, not last month, the month before, maybe? at the NAACP office, and we brought in 15, it was about 10 to 15 men who are already on reentry, federally and state. And we got a chance to talk to them to understand, like we can say and do our research and say, this is what we think should happen. This is what we think should be parts of the program. But we talked to people who are actually on reentry and doing it successfully. And so they were able to meet with us for 2 hours and give us insight on how we can make this wildly successful. Right now, we have 15 applicants to date. And in fact, I think that's a little bit more because we just got 3 more applicants today. We have 80-year-old grandmothers coming to the court. Just yesterday, someone came to my court. She was 80 years old, and she said, "Can I get that reentry application for my grandson?" People are beginning to hear about it and know that this is happening. These are just a couple of pictures of us at the different prisons that we've gone to. And we have partnered with Ohio Department of Corrections to bring this about. And we are so excited to report to you that they are 100% supporting us, their Office of Reentry. And if there are programs that, as we're vetting the candidates, and there are programs that we believe that the prison offers that they should take before being reintegrated into the community, we have been told by ODRC that they will bump our candidates to the front of the list so that they can take certain courses to be more successful on reentry. So our structure here is, it's the judicial component. Everyone will submit an application, and then you will go through the process. Now, what happens is they will submit an application. We will vet them very thoroughly, their backgrounds, who they'll live with. The application is about 15 pages, and we want to know everything we can about them. Then we vet them to see if they're even eligible for the program. If they are eligible, then we will go into our reentry plan and develop a reentry plan for them with service providers. And then we will set a hearing for judicial release. We will not release anyone without the plan in place. So we're not going to work backwards and release people and then figure out what to do. We're going to have everything in place before we release them. And at the moment that we have that hearing and I release them, they will have their plan in place. I will tell you that every single common pleas judge is committed to this effort, and I am so passionate about being collaborative in this effort that I have promised every common pleas judge that if I'm not the sentencing judge, if someone else is the sentencing judge, we will come and ask for permission. After we have thoroughly vetted the candidate, we'll ask your permission to bless them coming into this program. I will not take anyone into this program that the sentencing judge did not bless. And that's just part of the process again. So you want to talk about this? So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jackson, who's going to talk to you about the reentry component.
Thank you, Judge. It's not morning, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be before you. I haven't been before you in a while, so this is good. It's good to see you. So just to talk a little bit about the reentry process, and before I do that, I definitely want to say that this project really is the epitome of collaboration. You know, if you think about it, there's 3 departments that had to come together to make this come to fruition. So we have probation, reentry, and the common pleas court. So I'm really honored to be a part of the project. So we'll talk about the reentry piece of it. Someone from my office will be assigned to this project. They will function as a reentry specialist. And that person will walk with these participants through their reentry process, because we know reentry is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, some people come out and they have the familial support that they need, and then others do not. And so we need to be able to provide whatever support that they need to be successful. So that reentry specialist will connect them to resources, help them address and you know, deal with the barriers that they face when they come out. But also provide this life skills coaching process for them so that, you know, it's not just, here, let me connect you to this resource, here, let me connect you to that resource. It really is holding their hand and walking with them through the process. And so it's a little more intensive than what we normally would provide someone. So, and I believe that that's what's needed to make this work and help people become stable. So, this individual from my office will actually only carry a caseload of like 35 people, because we want to make sure, you know, that they're able to really give them the attention that they need and support that they need. But that is for the first year. And so I do want to thank the commission for supporting our work for next year and allowing us to have, you know, more capacity to support this project next year as we move forward. But we also want to mention, too, the data tracking, because, you know, we need to be able to tell this story and tell it from a qualitative perspective as well, not just a quantitative, you know, a quantitative perspective, not just a qualitative perspective. And so we'll be tracking the data. We'll be tracking these participants and, you know, tracking and reporting their success and working directly with this full team, this whole team, to help them be stable. So that's the reentry piece of it. I'm going to turn it back over to Judge Cross.
And so every participant that that comes into the program will be released through a judicial process, and they will be placed on probation. And then we have a dedicated probation officer, Ms. Erica Williamson, who will, you know, supervise them very thoroughly. We will take all nonviolent offenses, but no sexual offenses in nature, particularly the first few years, because this has to be wildly successful. It has to be. Participants are scheduled, will be scheduled to be discharged within 12 to 24 months of their term. They must intend to live in Hamilton County. We're not taking, we have gone to the prison and people have said, hey, I live in, I'm going to be coming back to Dayton. We say, we're sorry, this is for Hamilton County. If you're committed to living in Hamilton County, sentenced in Hamilton County and coming back to Hamilton County. If they're homeless, you know, because not everyone comes out and has a supportive network. But if they're homeless, they have to agree to live in a shelter until housing is available. That's a typo there, but electronic monitoring will be used if we do that. Male and females will be accepted, and participants with mental health and substance abuse histories are eligible. Who is not eligible? Anybody with a contact sex offense is not eligible for our program. Applicants who have 3 or more convictions are not eligible for our program. Incomplete applications, people who are serving time on 3 or more convictions. Applicants that are sentenced outside of Hamilton County, obviously. And if you were previously denied for judicial release, you cannot get into our program. Applicant has pending felonies and/or open warrants. We are not taking those. But I will tell you that our courthouse, there's a lot of buzz about reentry right now. And the head of our pretrial services called and said, we want to be a part. What can we do? And I was so excited about that. And what they're going to do, our pretrial services, if someone is coming back to Hamilton County and they're otherwise eligible for our program, and the sentencing judge has blessed them to be in our program, but they have an outstanding warrant, our pretrial services department is going to work with them to get that warrant recalled. Work with the judge who has that outstanding warrant and get that warrant recalled so they can participate in our program. Non-acceptance, judicial discretion. If the sentencing judge says no, it's no. And a negative institutional summary. As we're reviewing our applicants right now, we do see that there are some negative institutional summaries. If you have gotten into a fight with a guard, if you have some aggression in the prison, that's negative, that we're not going to accept you into our program. I'm going to skip over this. Yeah, most reentry courts, I did a listening tour throughout the whole state, and went to all the other reentry courts, either by Zoom or I literally drove there. And most of them have this type of structure, and we're going to do the same thing. And that is Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. Phase 1 requires a biweekly check-in. They will check in with the reentry team and with me. Each applicant will meet with me on a regular basis. And then, as they are doing well, we will graduate them to Phase 2, where it'll be a once a month. And then the Phase 3, which is a 40-day check-in. So what does success look like? In order to successfully complete the reentry docket, participants will have to demonstrate that they have maintained employment, that they have maintained their sobriety, that they have stable housing, that they are compliant with the law, and compliant with the terms of probation or community control. We say the best practices are all of the local county courts, and these are the judges from these counties who have been walking with me in making sure that our program will be wildly successful. So we thank you so very much for the opportunity to come and introduce our program to you. Thank you so much for all that you do, the commission, and the work that you do, and support of the Office of Reentry. Thank you so very much, and we'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you for this very thorough and innovative presentation. I do have a couple questions, and I know Commissioner Dreehouse as well. First of all, Judge, thank you for bringing this to Hamilton County, and this is so critical. We don't, I think, talk enough about reentry. Ms. Jackson, I promise I'll be spending some more time with you. My first year is crazy, but as it relates to reentry, what many people may or may not know, did a lot of work in reentry as Vice Mayor of Cincinnati, and it wasn't called reentry, it's called Second Chance. Yep. And now, soon to be retired United States Senator Rob Portman was a congressman, and the late congresswoman from Cuyahoga County, they came up with the Second Chance Act. And in Cincinnati, we held the first town hall meeting down at the West End Lincoln Center. Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, if you have this town hall meeting, it's just going to be it's going to be crazy. And it was not. It was a lot of people there, and I learned a lot. And then I just became immersed into Second Chance. And Cincinnati was the first to have a program. We funded a program through the Community Action Agency where people could, we gave them land, they could build these homes, the money went back. They can also get, at the same time, credited with Cincinnati State. We put money toward that, and then my office became the first unofficial reentry office. I hired someone, one of my staff members was dedicated to that. We created a list where we didn't have, the internet like we got now, mm-hmm. but we had a list where you can get hired, and then continued that work at the State House, where we funded so that Hamilton County could have a reentry program. So it's now called reentry, but it was Second Chance when we began it. And I had people come in. Aramark and Philadelphia had the #1 program in the country and had gotten an award by President Bush at the time. So it wasn't a Democrat or Republican issue. It was bipartisan. And also went through their process of everything that happens when you come out. And people who are in, who want to do better, who say, when I get out, I'm going to do these things, I'm going to do all that, and then you get hit with reality, a brown paper bag, nowhere to work, nobody's going to hire you. Sometimes family don't want to be bothered with you, or you're not able to come back to those places. And by the way, here's a child support payment that just kept racking up while you were in jail. And so all of a sudden, your dreams of not returning to the streets, sometimes we put a, what I call a scarlet letter on you, where you become nowhere to turn, and then you turn back to some of the ways that you shouldn't be. So true. So I definitely want to have time to dig into this, but we have a good program going now, and one of the things I wanted to ask you, so what this is a reentry court. I know you said docket. Yeah,
so it really is the same thing. We are not seeking certification until this is wildly successful. When this becomes wildly successful, we're going to turn it into a reentry court. Right now, it's just going to be my docket.
Gotcha,
So-
okay. Wanted to understand that. Also, on this, would you need additional staff? Are you using an existing team? I know we've got some staff we're putting in, but do you have all the tools you'll need?
So as far as the court piece is concerned, I just hired our reentry docket specialist, Cheryl Miles, and I actually stole her from the Office of Reentry.
You're in trouble now.
I know. But you know what? Our team is so collaborative. It's like, we all work together. But yeah, she just came on to the court. I anticipate that their other judges are going to want to have a reentry docket. That's our goal. And that's going to make it a reentry court. And so at this point, we did just hire one person. I think Ms. Jackson has some staffing needs.
Yes, thank you. So, you make me feel short when I bring this down. No, actually, we are hiring someone soon. We have a position that will be posted on the website soon for the county, and it is a reentry transition specialist. But we're asking in that job description for someone who has lived experience. So we're hoping, to have a returning citizen on our staff soon. And then hopefully next year, we'll be hiring another similar role.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Ms. Jackson, I think it's critical because some of this, this allows us to get back to some of the original premise of the reentry where we're dealing, like you said, they're coming out of a certain area, returning home.
Right.
And you're able, that specialist, what you described, would be able to put a little more time kind of
Right.
following and all of the, I mean, because when they showed me that, I was like, my goodness, at the end, you just got a brown paper bag and you don't have anything. And I learned also people that got training for like barber, and if they don't finish while they're in prison, they come out, they got to start all over to get the barber's license. But I think this would give a chance for that specialist to kind of get that one-on-one. Is that what you're thinking?
Exactly. It's more of a navigator type role. We have the peer navigator, so this is more of a reentry navigator type role, and just to help walk them through the process, because each person's journey will be different, but there's still some very common things that, people coming out of incarceration, they have to deal with and they need help with.
That's great. Now, you had the REEC. Can you say what that is? Because they might have thought they just left off an E. It's not the Reese program, it's the REEC. What is that? What does that stand for?
That was actually just my abbreviation of reentry court, but it doesn't mean anything.
I mean, it's not a
It
bad
doesn't-
thing, but I just,
Yeah.
people say, Reese, you
No.
got a court system over there? No, I do not.
That's right, that's right. That was my own abbreviation.
Okay, great. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Welcome, Judge, and welcome
you.
to the team for being here, and of course, to Trina. And I do want to shout out to Trina. She's been doing this work on behalf of the county since 2017, in the January of 2017. So thank you. Trina, you have, you remind us every time we see you about the importance of the reentry work that you're doing to welcome people back into the community and to make sure that they're successful when they reenter the community. So thank you so much for the work you're doing.
thank
Yeah, without the collaboration, I know this just doesn't work. So thank you for that. I have a couple questions about what you've presented to us. And some of them were answered, but I just want to kind of highlight them because they were questions that came to mind. So you are, as opposed to what Trina does, which is a response to people that are already leaving jail and going into the community, this is a program that you are proactively pulling people out of a prison, a jail, that you think, or rather that fit the qualifications or the eligibility. And so did I see a slide where it said that they have to have had a year into their sentence served, and then they have to be, is it 12 to 24 months out from release?
That's exactly right, Commissioner Dreehouse. So this is a early release program,
Okay.
a judicial early release program. But that's right, those are the qualifications. They have to have served at least a year and have at least 12 to 24 months on the other end because we're going to release them, and we want them to be in our program 12 to 18 months. We expect them to be in our program 12 to 18 months. We're going to walk with them for that long of time. We expect that if you're very successful, you'll be in our program for 12 months. But we understand that there may be graduated sanctions that, you know, someone might, they didn't go to work. And you're like, why didn't you go to work? What's going on? So there might be a little sanction for that, and that might extend their time, you know, a few weeks or another month. So that's why we say 12 to 18 months.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. And the other piece that I was looking at was, if these folks that you are pulling out then, they all have to have been sentenced in Hamilton County.
Correct.
So I just want to clarify this point, because I've been involved in some of this work myself, and people oftentimes are concerned that we have people coming in from other parts of the state that have these convictions, and we're bringing them down to Hamilton County for a great service, but then what
That's
happens
absolutely
after
right.
that? So these folks are from Hamilton County, sentenced in Hamilton County, they're coming back to Hamilton County.
That's right.
Okay.
It's all about Hamilton County.
Okay, thank you for the clarity on that. I was going to ask also, I noticed that it's not a reentry court, but rather a reentry docket. So much like the housing docket, which is spread out amongst a number of judges, is that the expectation? Or do you think you're going to get all of this originally in your court, but as you say, then it will start to move around to other courts? Or is it designed to be different judges serving in the reentry docket?
So as long as I'm a judge, I'm going to be a part of the reentry docket. What I'm expecting is that other judges who kind of now have their eye toward reentry will also want to do this. So it will be 2 dockets, and then maybe 3 dockets, like that. That it would expand, not move around from judge to judge.
Okay, so, and then eventually if it becomes a reentry court, then it would be in one judge's courtroom.
Correct. That's right.
So help me understand then, because my last question is about the number of people that will be served. So I don't have any sense of the population that would be potentially eligible for the program, to your last point that you hope it expands. How many people do you expect, right as we sit today, are eligible for this? And then how many of them do you think we can serve per year?
So there's 27% of the overall 43,000 that are in Ohio prisons that we're targeting, all right? And I can't remember that number. Is it like 4,000? Around 4,000 or 5,000 people. And of that 4,000 or 5,000, I would say approximately half would, to maybe 75% would be eligible. Because remember, we're not taking any sex offenses. But there are a lot of non-violent offenses like, you know, drug offenses, possession offenses, receiving stolen property offenses. I think that we haven't done any calculations, but I do believe that we probably will serve in any given year approximately about 100.
Okay.
Well, the first year, we definitely only wanted
35. Yeah, the first year we only want 35 because it has to be wildly successful.
I've heard you say that. And we also want it to be wildly
Yes,
successful.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I was kind of wondering how much potential there is, really, for this to expand. How many folks you think might be eligible? I didn't know if it was I heard the small number to begin with to make sure that there is success, but I didn't have a sense of how many people from Hamilton County, of that number you gave us, that might be eligible overall. How many of them are from Hamilton County? Because if it's hundreds, then there's all kinds of potential.
There's definitely hundreds.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we'll be in the thousands, but it's definitely in the hundreds.
Okay.
Per year.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. All right. Well, I too hope you're wildly successful.
you.
Glad that Reentry's a partner in all of this, and thank you for the presentation. I think we've got a culture shift going on in Hamilton County in many, many areas, and this is one of them, where we are saying different things about folks that are incarcerated, and we're embracing them and supporting them as they leave the Justice Center, the prisons, and reenter society. Because as you say, these folks are coming back to our community, and we want them to have the supports they need when they come back. So really appreciate the presentation and the work you put in on this.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I want to reemphasize again, non-violent offenders. We want to make sure of that. Thank you all so much. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation is Diana Christie from MSD, and we're going to talk about the impervious surface fee update.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Very good. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am here today to talk about this impervious surface charge. We were last here to present to you back in February, so it's been a while. So this is going to be mostly a recap and then some information in response to questions that you had at that time and just overall where we're at and what the next steps should be. So just to, again, introduce what we're talking about today, this was a recommendation that came out of the Affordability Task Force, and then the commissioners, you directed MSD and the county administration to consider implementation of a impervious surface charge. And that resolution, then from there, we started working on our feasibility study that we're going to talk about today. That direction was in 2019. So initially, we started work with the county administration kind of leading a larger discussion, and ultimately in 2020 and then the beginning of 21, recognized that there really were two pathways, essentially, that we needed to be looking at in this effort. So one, kind of the larger effort or the larger issue of how our region charges for and provides stormwater surfaces. So that's kind of bigger than MSD, and the county has led that. But then more immediately, and what we've been focused on is the feasibility of MSD to implement a wet weather impervious surface charge as part of how we charge for the services that we provide. So just to recap, what we've done is we've done this study. It involved a lot of technical and financial analysis, again, that we presented to you earlier this year. And as you know, we worked with Black & Veatch, who is a well-known and very experienced firm in this regard. So they've really dug in and done a lot of that technical analysis, and they were here to present to you in February. I'm going to go through very quickly the development of a methodology that Black & Veatch presented. Again, it's going to be a quick overview. I am not the expert on some of the technical details, nor do I think you want me to reiterate all of that, but I just want to refresh your recollection of how we determined or how we're really suggesting and that this could be feasible for MSD. Then we're going to recap the status of the stakeholder engagement sessions and go through some of the questions that you shared with us in our last meeting. So to begin, just to kind of reiterate and reorient ourselves with what we're speaking of when we're talking about a wet weather charge for MSD. And we're looking at MSD's services that we provide to the service area, again, most of Hamilton County. In our system, the cost of the services that we provide, and as you know, the services that we provide currently include operation and maintenance, capital costs, everything involved in collecting and treating the flow that gets into our sewers. Those charges include the costs associated with the wet weather, with the rainfall that gets into our sewers as well. Today, we currently charge for all of those costs, but with one basic fee. It's not very basic, but one fee. We call that the sewer service charge, and that's based on water usage. This effort and this feasibility looks at charging, in addition to that, charging based on impervious surface. And again, while that is separating how we charge for the services, the overall services and cost are the same. So I think that's something we just want to, just share up front again. The services, the cost of the services is based on, everything you see with our budget and our expenditures. And really, we're looking at bifurcating how we charge our customers for those costs. That being said, it's just important to note that this doesn't bring in any new revenue, but it does provide an opportunity to change how we allocate the cost of those services among our customers and essentially builds a larger customer base for MSD. And so again, this is just a recap of how we set the methodology to determine a methodology for this new charge. So what we had to do is, look at how much money is needed, what is the cost of those services that are associated with wet weather? How could we base the fee on impervious surface? And we talked about billing units. How do we create a billing unit or a unit rate based on different customers? And then how do we recover those costs from customers? This is really just to reemphasize that there was an effort looking at really the last 3-year averages, I guess up through 2021, of our overall cost, and saying what portion of those costs are attributable to sanitary flow, so really the dry weather typical costs versus the wet weather costs. So that involved, looking at our operations, looking at how we manage operations, maintenance, the SBU program, everything else, and kind of attributing those costs to those, looking at them as two different services that are provided. And as you can see, so the total doesn't change. The total cost of services there is about $260 million. And when we went through that exercise, what we found is that it's about 50%, 50-50 between the wet weather costs and the sanitary sewer costs. So as we went through, the bifurcation of those charges would really be, it's actually 49.6 for sanitary, 50.4 for wet weather to reach the total cost. And this is some of the data that we used to work through and determine the customer classes and then the billing units. So impervious area based on our service area, Hamilton County parcels, and then the layers of impervious area is something that is available, and I'm going to go to the next slide. This information is something that's been available from a number of different efforts. Some of it is data that MSD has been primarily collecting. Some of it is through Cincinnati Parks. We worked very closely with CAGIS. And so this is all data that exists to really determine where those impervious surfaces are and, in which part, ultimately to define impervious area per parcel. So these are the type of things that are available and that we used for our analysis. And just to point out, some of this data, it will need ongoing updates, but we also, even since we initially set out to do this, have learned that there is new information available. So it's something that will need to continue to be updated and managed for MSD, but also for the others that collect this information as well. Also, just kind of, again, looking at all the data, all the analysis, this is the results of, the types of customers that we have based on land use. So interesting to look and see that it's, almost equivalent of non-residential, and then on the right, that's single-family residential, multifamily residential. So really a fairly even split. Then you have your undeveloped land as a small percentage, and then those condos and multifamily are separated out. So we use that information. Oops. Wrong button. Okay. We use that information, that data about, customer classes, land uses, the impervious area data. Then we needed to take steps to determine how we develop system-wide billing units for each of these customer classes based on the impervious area. So again, we use the county's land use codes to define those customer classes. Then we're able to look at the impervious area based on and impervious area, also number of parcels, lot sizes, would all be part of really defining those classes. And then determine, based on that and based on the needed revenue, again, we know the cost of this service that we're providing, to determine billing units for each customer class. We do have, in here, we did adjust for potential credits, and I think data contingencies, maybe appeals, to ultimately come up with what the preliminary rate per billing unit would be. This is where I'm not going to get into all of the detail on that, but we'd be happy to, come back and get into that a little bit further. I do want to point out, though, that the reason that the credits is part of this process is, recognizing that if we have credits in this program, that really, that doesn't, any activities, and we'll talk about what kind of activities could lead to credits, wouldn't ultimately, there's no evidence that that would lower our costs, that would lower MSD's costs. So we have to recover those costs by adjustments to the overall charges that, to fulfill the revenue requirements. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I didn't realize that was animated. There we go. Like, I don't see that slide. Okay, so this is just quickly the difference. So we really, if you break it down to just these three categories, we have single-family residential, and this is where we developed tiered classes for the impervious area. So rather than every parcel having its own individual calculation for the amount of imperviousness, there's tiers. It's based on lot size and the data we have for those. So there's 5 tiers, and then for each non-residential, we would do an individual calculation based on the data that we would have for the impervious areas. And again, that's really because with residential, you do have a lot more similarities. You can kind of, as we know, we've built neighborhoods over time, and you'll put an entire neighborhood in, and everybody has the same lot size, generally the same building. Businesses and non-residential tend to be more unique from property to property. And then there is a category for undeveloped land that we would potentially, in our proposal, be charging even for the undeveloped properties. Exemptions were discussed, and the recommendation, the preference would be to really limit exemptions, so it's all properties in the service area except for public streets and public right-of-way. Not having exemptions, as we've talked about previously, really enhances the equitability of a charge like this. So the more people that are part of the overall customer base, the more that we really have a nexus, as you can see, between the user fee and the services that are being provided. So a little bit more on the credits and incentives, and these again, these are just ideas and examples that Black & Veatch put together as part of what we've shared with the board and what we've shared with stakeholders. These would have to be developed to be more further for any implementation. But the stormwater credits on the left are examples of non-residential credits. On the right, you have stormwater incentives. Those are typically for the residential customers. I think most of the communities that have implemented some kind of a similar impervious surface charge do have some form of a credit program or an incentive program, and we certainly think that it would be beneficial. Most of the benefit, though, is more derived from increasing education, getting support from the community, rather than really providing an opportunity to impact or affect MSD's overall cost of the services we're providing. And what I mean there is that even if we do, drive change, and you have property owners that are able to make changes on their property to limit the imperviousness or to improve the perviousness, those changes, that will take a long time. And typically that kind of change over time, it can really benefit a community's resiliency. It can help us in ways in the future, 25, 30 years down the road. But for the initial time being, we don't have any evidence or data to show that the kind of changes that property owners would make would impact MSD's cost for operating and maintaining our system or for responding to the consent decree. So just want to be clear about that. And that's why, when you build credits into the program, you have to recognize that you have to balance those costs ultimately with how you establish the fees. So again, that was very quick, but I didn't want to spend too much time on that. Really just want to get to the status of where we're at today. So as a recap, these are the sessions that MSD, we held these sessions with stakeholders hosted by Black & Veatch. And so this started actually after some of the initial efforts with the county with the same groups. So these sessions were very focused on those things that I just rushed through, how we use this data to create a new charge and to look at this, the customer classes and to ultimately create billing units and set up the program. So we held 4 sessions before we came to present to the board in February. And as you can see the dates of that there. So we presented to the board in February. One of the comments was, or I don't know if it was in the meeting or following it, was to add a few new stakeholders. So we have since added 2 new stakeholders. We had an additional meeting where, since it was a smaller group, we did everything all in one long session with them, where we were able to answer their questions, and they felt as though that was enough of a briefing to then move to the next step, which has not been scheduled yet, but we're working on, we've been, working on dates for this, which would be reconvening all of the stakeholders, including the new stakeholders, to recap and to solicit feedback, which it's our understanding that the board would like feedback from those stakeholders. Just a quick recap of who is in the stakeholder advisory group. There are, I believe, a few additional, there were individuals that were appointed by the commissioners at the time, which was prior to Commissioner Reese joining the board, but there's 2 or 3 other individuals in this group. As you can see, we had 2 new members that we've since met with and briefed. And then there's also an agency group. So the agency group has been engaged at the same time, well, in different meetings. And that agency group are other entities, so MSD, then we have Hamilton County Stormwater, the city Stormwater Management Utility, a couple other municipalities. I know we have Reading, Forest Park, Loveland. So that agency group is a little bit different discussion because of, it's really representing those, those public entities versus the private property owners. So that brings me to, we briefed the board, and at that time, I think we came twice, went into a lot of detail about what the feasibility of implementing this impervious surface charge, what it would look like, how we would do it, and then the board had some questions for us. In addition, again, we had the additional stakeholder groups, and then the desire to get a recommendation from all of those. But with respect to the questions that the board posed to MSD that we looked into and provided feedback on, just generally speaking, but I'm going to go through them. A lot of the questions that you're seeking answers to we're unable to provide with the specificity that I think you need, that you're looking for. And so we just wanted to be clear that, at this point, it would require some more in-depth analysis. Probably the largest thing being we need to update some of that data, but we really need to build what we would call a master account file, which would look at the existing MSD customer accounts with the real data for those parcels to be able to provide some more specific information, feedback that I think the commissioners, that you all are looking for. Let me go through the questions. I think that will help. So the first question was, is there a list of new customers that would be getting a bill? So we do know that with the proposed new wet weather impervious surface charge, we would have customers that currently today do not get a bill from MSD because they do not use any water. So our current sewer charges are based on your water consumption. So with the bifurcation of those charges and the new wet weather charge, there would be property owners that would now be customers that are not currently. We don't have a way to provide that list, though. And that kind of gets to what we would need to do in terms of building out that information with, cross-referencing accounts, mapping, and developing a master account file. Just seeing if there's anything else I needed to mention on that one. But I think, just generally, yes, there would be new customers that would be getting a bill, but no, we are not able to identify that currently. The next question was, has MSD identified properties or parcels that currently do not have a sewer fee but would have a stormwater fee? So essentially, I think this is just a little bit more exploring that same issue a little bit further and how many properties there are and what acreage. So again, we really need to dig in and build that master account file. But we also just want to clarify, and I said this in the beginning, you know, these new customers would not be bringing in new revenue for MSD, because again, the revenue requirements are based on the cost to provide the services, and those aren't changing. The services we provide today include the cost to treat any wet weather flow that is entering our system. So we would not be generating new revenue. We would, however, be reallocating those costs among our customers, and we would be presumably adding customers to our overall, you know, ratepayer base. But again, these are some of the items that we're not able to provide more specificity on: what numbers, what's the acreage, how many properties. There was a question, the third question was, where else in Ohio does a utility have an impervious surface fee? There are other municipalities and other, you know, counties in Ohio that have this. It's just, this is a little bit difficult to answer simply because MSD, we're somewhat unique in that we're a county sewer district. We do not have the stormwater, we don't have the stormwater utility as part of MSD services. So we're providing sanitary service, recognizing, of course, we have combined sewers and we have wet weather flow getting into our system. But these other entities, these other utilities in Ohio, we know Columbus, Cleveland have some variation of an impervious surface fee, and so we provided some of that detail there. And of course, even here in Hamilton County, the other stormwater utilities that are charging for these services do base it on impervious area to some extent. So I think that, you know, we'd be happy to provide more information on any of the specifics, but none of them are exactly comparable to MSD of Cincinnati. I think the other thing I wanted to mention on that, that overall question and topic, you know, I think that's one of the challenges and one of the focus area, that's kind of the focus area too, or the pathway to, where it's how does this fit into the larger issue of how stormwater is managed and paid for in Greater Cincinnati and Hamilton County. So question 4 was about exemptions. And I went through this quickly before, but happy to dig in a little further. But the proposal and the feasibility study, the recommendation is that we limit the exemptions to very few types of land. As you can see there, it's really just these public streets, rights of way, but not providing that to other privately owned properties, or for that matter, publicly owned properties, you know, that would otherwise have a charge for impervious surface. So very limited exceptions is what we would propose. The next question was the impact to businesses, churches, nonprofits, and others, and how would this make Hamilton County more competitive, or would we see businesses move out for this? The first part of the question is really just, you know, what is the impact? And I think that's, you know, it's really key for the board to be able to make a decision to move forward or not. We can provide hypotheticals, and we have, and I'm going to go through a few of those here, but we really aren't able to take any category of customer and say this will be their impact, because it is really all going to depend on an individual property's water usage currently, which sets their current service charge, and then the extent of impervious area. So even if we were to try to lump all residential customers together, that's going to depend on some of their individual factors, their water usage, and which tier they fall into in terms of their parcel size and impervious area. But we do want to, you know, show some examples, and here we have, you know, just a very general hypothetical that you could say properties with high volume of water usage, low impervious area, they would typically see a lowering in their total monthly charge if we bifurcation of the charges and the implementation of the wet weather charge. Properties with low volume of water usage and large impervious area, you know, generally what you're going to see is potentially a higher charge overall, a higher total bill for those property owners. We do have some more examples at the end, so I'm going to keep going through the questions and can talk more about those. The next question, though, was what impact will the impervious surface charge have on municipal township-owned properties, county-owned properties, renters, churches, just really, a host of examples. Again, with the same caveat of we haven't completed enough analysis to provide any certainty. Generally, the governments, churches, nonprofits, there isn't an exemption for those parcels, so it is really going to depend on the customer class, the water, so again, if they're residential or commercial, their water usage, and then the impervious area of their property. So it will be property by property to determine that impact. Renters is a little more difficult. As you know, MSD's, our billing is through Greater Cincinnati Water Works for the majority of our users, and we bill the property owners, not renters. So that will come down to more of a property-specific issue in terms of who pays the bill and potentially even their own lease requirements. So, proposing no changes to that overall structure of how we bill with this, in that it's the property owner. The impacts to renters will really depend on their individual situation. Okay, and then there was a question, what incentives are being considered to reduce the amount of impervious surface, or the impervious surface charge for each property owner? So we have evaluated, we have proposed, certain credits. Again, the credits are really, the categories on the left really are more for the non-residential, whereas the incentives are for the residential. There are more or less that could be implemented with the charge if we were to move forward. But these are, things where you would essentially provide a credit if the property owner performed work on the property to reduce the runoff, or to, even things like stormwater education is something that has been proposed in other areas. For residential, typically you're looking at more one-time reimbursement or grant-like programs for projects that are implemented on property. Providing assistance to property owners in any number of ways is another way to provide incentives and credits. And that ultimately, would either be a one-time reduction or an overall credit on their charge. Again, the impact of that can be what we've seen in other communities, and that have already implemented something like this, is there are certain charges that businesses will, they will incur, even if it's significant. Whether or not it drives change on that side is always going to be a business decision and a risk that they're going to, determine. So I guess, one thing is how many people will take action to make themselves eligible for credits, is unknown, but it's certainly not going to be everybody. And over time, will that have an impact for MSD? We don't have any indication that would have an impact in the near term or even, 15, 20 years. The cost to operate and maintain our system and to comply with the consent decree are really based on, larger CSO reduction obligations that, there really isn't any indication that private property action, even if it is starting to be implemented at a larger scale, would reduce those costs for us in the short term. Long term, it does start to drive change and change how our built environment is affected by private property actions. And I think for that reason, can be a really good policy measure to include in a fee like this. But just want to clarify, what it is and what it isn't if you're going to implement a credit. Okay, and I think this is just two more questions. Typical sizes of the impervious area for our residential properties and businesses. So, I mentioned before, residences are typically a little bit more, it's homogeneous. We can find a lot of similarities. The typical single-family resident, or I guess is the median, is that the 2,370 square feet. For businesses, that is the median. However, we really, have a lot of fluctuation depending on land use or depending on the property use. So that while it's 2,844, we're going to have a lot of much larger impervious area sizes depending on, those types of businesses. So then we have some examples. Most of these were shown before and shared in more detail. I'll go through them and then can answer questions. So this first example is a very simple illustration of a new customer. So what you have there, sample of a property owner, this is kind of the second line down, property owner with no sewer service currently, meaning they don't have a water connection. And they have 10,000 square foot of impervious area, so fairly large compared to our average. And you'll see currently they don't receive a bill from us at all. So under what we proposed and would need refinement, however, that new bill that they would receive would be $70. And these are all monthly, right? All the charges that are on these. Okay, so all these examples are showing a monthly sewer charge. Just wanted to clarify that. So the next examples, and these are two separate examples here. So the top one is just one property, looking at one property, one residential customer. The 5 CCF is their current, that's their current water usage, which we are using to set our sewer charge. So under our current billing system, they're paying a little over $50 a month for their sewer bill. With the implementation of the wet weather charge and based on this property being a Tier 2 property, meaning of the residential classifications, they're in that, just in that second size for impervious area. And side note, most residential properties would fall in Tier 2 or Tier 3. So we don't have as many of those larger ones. So this is a pretty typical property owner example under the billing units as established to date. This would show that the sewer charge, the sanitary sewer charge would drop to $22.94 a month, and the wet weather charge would be $13.31 a month. So an overall total monthly bill of $36, which, as you can see, is a reduction in the residential bill. The examples on the bottom, this gets a little bit confusing because we've got a different format here. What we're showing is 5 different new property bills. So an example for, again, we have 5 tiers of residential properties. So as you go across Tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then showing, just based on their meter size and their volume of CCF, showing how each one of those tiers would show that until you get to Tier 4, you're seeing a reduction in their rate. Tier 4 and Tier 5, you're starting to see that those larger impervious areas, even on residential properties, they would be getting either no reduction or an increase in their bill. So I know that's kind of confusing because they're very different formats how it's presented, but those are both residential examples. Again, most residential properties in Hamilton County would fall in that Tier 2 or Tier 3. So a couple of non-residential customer examples. What we're showing here is the top one is a non-residential customer. They're using 10 CCF, that's their volume charge based on their water usage. And then we have 3 different impervious area calculations to show you whether it increases or decreases. So that smaller, just 5,000 impervious area, you're seeing that their proposed charge under the bifurcated costs of sewer and wet weather comes down $25. The larger impervious area is both 10,000 and 45. Again, same volume of water usage on these 3 examples. It's the 10 CCF. Their bill would increase in this scenario. The second example, the difference here is we're a higher volume user. So the top one is 10, bottom one is larger water meter serving the property, which is part of that billing charge on the sanitary side. And then the larger volume user, those same impervious areas, what you see there is the increase sorry, let me see. Yes, the bill is increasing. No, it's decreasing. I'm sorry. That would make sense. Now I'm confusing myself. So I know this is a confusing chart to follow, but if you follow it along, so this is showing higher water usage than the top one where it's the lower volume users. So typically your lower volume water users are going to see more of a benefit with the implementation of the wet weather fee. So those are just some of the examples, and we can discuss those a little bit further, but really just kind of to summarize and then talk about our additional scope of work. Really, this is a simple overview of what cost bifurcation is and the associated cost recovery. So this is really just looking at our revenue requirements, which is looking at our overall cost and how we would bill our customers under the proposed bifurcation, which would be a sanitary sewer charge and a wet weather impervious surface charge. The allocation, as I had mentioned before, is almost 50-50. So that is the overall cost that we used to develop the billing units and to show these examples. We've discussed, and this information, I don't think the proposed scope of work, but the responses were provided to the board back in July. We have since, identified more specifically what additional scope of work we would take, the next steps. We've talked with county administration about that in some detail, but really the focus for the last couple of months has been updating those new stakeholders and then trying to set a meeting to gather feedback from all of the stakeholders. We're ready to proceed with the additional work at any time, and we do have sufficient funding, but we have not really moved further because really just trying to make sure we want to proceed to those next steps. So this font's a little hard to read, but this information can be shared separately, and as I mentioned, we've shared this with county administration. The first one, I think, is one of the keys. This is really pulling out that, that is the parking lot layer that I know we have updated mapping, and those layers already exist, and that would be important to update our data. And then the utility accounts and really digging in on the specific properties is a significant step there. And, so I think ultimately steps 1, 2, 3, 4, most of those need to be done to really answer the questions in more detail and provide specific examples or by customer class. And then this additional information would really get us to where we would be able to respond more fully develop what a potential credit program would look like, and then bring back findings to the board. Move to the next one. And this is just a summary, essentially just kind of where we're at today, what we've done. Again, this is just the portion that MSD has focused on, the feasibility of implementing this charge and bifurcating our costs, where we've had the stakeholder sessions. And again, we met with the board in February, had that new session, and where we're at today is, wanting to bring all those stakeholders together and see, whether they have a recommendation or whether they too have additional information that they're seeking to, help inform a recommendation from the stakeholders that the board is seeking. So with that, that's all I had to present today. I know I rushed through the beginning part quickly, but happy to dig in on anything further. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. This is a very complicated issue. This issue, I guess, asking to look into this impervious fees, you said, you indicated, started in 2019. So I'm going to start with Commissioner Driehaus. I was not here at that time, and I'll let her start with the questions, and then I have some follow-up questions as well. Commissioner Driehaus.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana, for the presentation. I have a kind of a very broad question to start with. When you talk about when we start to charge for the impervious surface and for the runoff going into the system, and there's a charge associated with that, and then there is a savings on the other side to a residential customer that has less impervious surface, even if they have usage on the sewer charge end. And you say that the calculus doesn't bring any revenue because what you're doing is balancing any revenues with savings. So it's a wash, right? Because some people are going to pay more, some people are going to pay less. My question is, can there be, or tell me if the ORC or something else prohibits this, can there be a scenario under which we are charging for that runoff for the impervious surface? We are probably giving some kind of discount on the residential side, but do we have the option of not balancing that out so much as taking some of the revenue that's generated, putting some of it towards cost savings for the residential property, but also then having another pot of money, for lack of a better term, to start to target some of the issues that are creating the problem to begin with, in trying to keep some of that water out of the system? Is there a scenario under which that exists, or are you saying that any revenue generated has to balance with the residential side, or anybody that would save money, and there is no way to create a fund that would help us get to some of the infrastructure issues that might be helpful keeping money out of the system, or keeping water out of the system? Do you understand my question?
I think so, yes.
all
And
right.
I think this is why I was kind of prompting some of this, because I think this is where the discussion needs to go, just to really understand what implementing a charge like this does and what it doesn't do. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're proposing and what we're able to do is we charge our customers for the services we provide. So that is defined by statute, how we, ultimately, we can't charge for things that MSD doesn't have authority to provide certain services. How we recover those charges currently, doesn't allocate costs based on imperviousness or flow that's getting in. But it's the same costs that we're establishing that we need to recover from our customers. So I guess there's, at the outset, I want to say, if there are things that MSD isn't doing or needs to do in the future and our costs are higher, we would need to bring in more revenue to cover those costs. And with an impervious surface fee, maybe the balance moves more in that direction versus sanitary. So if the charge is associated with the cost of that service, then ultimately the cost of that service could go up. Things are saying maybe we want to create a fund, we want to create something so that we can tackle these issues that we're not tackling today. As long as those are issues that MSD, as a county sewer district, can use its rate, use our funds for, we certainly can do that with the funds we're bringing in through an impervious surface charge, because those are things that we can, those are services we can provide and we can use those funds for. So if there are things that, again, it has to all be based on a established billing and how we charge those to our customers. We want it to be equitable. But there's no reason that in the future we couldn't provide services that we're not providing today using the funds that we bring in from our customers. Does that answer it a little bit?
Let me distill that to see if I got it right. So what you're saying is that while all the calculations that we have seen do this balance, right? Any revenue that's coming in is then applied to a customer that is going to save money, and so it's a wash, it's even. If we were to say, we want to take some of that revenue and apply it to projects that reduce the water from going into the system, which ultimately helps everybody, we could do that, but none of these scenarios exemplify that.
I think it's that the fee, how we charge our customers, doesn't drive the services that we're providing. It's, if there is, whether it's a compliance obligation, a permit, consent decree, or the board saying we want to establish a fund, we want to establish this as a benefit that MSD is going to provide, that's something that MSD can do, and then we have to charge our users for it appropriately. matching the dollars to the fund doesn't really work with how how we're established, because everything is one giant pot of money. So you don't really tie the dollars from here to here, you know. So again, you establish the fee based on the needed revenue to cover the cost of our service, or you establish our billing, our charges. The cost of those services and the services we provide can increase and can expand and do things that maybe we aren't doing today. So I think what I get, what I am challenged by what you're suggesting is that it's kind of the new impervious surface charge driving the ability to do work, and it really should be the other way around, which is what is the service that MSD is providing, and how do we charge our customers for it equitably under this scenario? I mean, we could do the same, I guess the other thing is we could do the same thing today, with the people that are paying for, you know, but the current process of charging are only people that have water usage, and it's based on their volume of water. But we could certainly decide that we want to incentivize certain actions, even on private property. We could set up an entire program to have property owners perform work to eliminate flow. We did that, I think, back in the 90s. I need Jack here to give me the history, but, you know, like a stormwater removal program, that has something that the board authorized, you know, many years ago. And there was a portion paid by property owners, a portion paid by MSD. You know, those are things that we can do. How we recover that cost from our customers is just based on our billing. So I think it's the question of what are we drive, you know, which one drives the other? And I don't think that the charge drives the ability to provide the service.
All right.
I didn't clarify it at all, did I?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yep.
If I could just, so here's the way I'm, and just a high-level example. I think what you're saying, Diane, I think as I'm hearing it, we're just kind of talking flip sides of the same coin, perhaps. But I think what I hear you saying, Diana, is right now, if the costs of the utility are, let's just say, $300 million a year, okay? The cost of the utility are $300 million a year to do everything we're doing today. And under what you're proposing here in the presentation today is a way to bifurcate those costs based upon the drivers to that, and that is wastewater and surface water coming into the utility. Now, if we want to say the costs of the utility are $301 million in order to create a program to help generators of surface flow do things to their property, et cetera, to reduce that, et cetera. Now, all of a sudden, you got to have a $301 million utility, and we just have to figure out the way that those costs are covered in the whole with both the wastewater fee and the impervious surface fee, correct?
Yes, thank you.
So,
I actually understood that, yes.
Sorry. Sometimes I think I'm like,
Okay,
yeah, I've been
yeah.
spending too much time in it, and,
Okay,
you know,
no,
and I
but it
guess
is,
back to Diana's question, then I think we just have to talk about, from a legal perspective, how do you go about ensuring that the dollars allocated to those programs are coming from the correct source, et cetera. If there is any need to do that, I don't know.
I don't believe that there is any need to do that. Again, we could do certain things today, even without implementing, you know, without bifurcating our cost structure. Now, our customers may say, well, we don't like how you're balancing those costs because, you know, there's somebody else maybe should be contributing more. So what we're looking at is a way to get closer to a representation of the true cost, you know, the customers contributing what the true cost is. But there's nothing preventing us from doing that under our current scenario as well. It's just that the individuals that are paying those costs, and it's established, it's legal, it's equitable, it's just not as directly tied to where the, you know, cost is really coming from.
So I think what's confusing me is, isn't the cost relative? I mean, you know, as the costs are driven largely by asset management, the consent decree, and the service being provided. Like, those are the costs of MSD. And so if we were to say, we're going to ramp it up, if we had the capacity to do this, and address more of those needs, primarily consent decree and asset management, then the cost of utility would go up because we're doing more, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of, I don't feel like I never have felt like there's a set cost to MSD, because every year the budget is different than the year before, whether it's operating or capital. And so I don't see it as a finite, I see it as more of a floating number. And so that's why I think I'm getting a little confused with the conversation. All I'm getting at is that if we were to implement an impervious surface fee, we could say, this is an equity issue, and we simply need to have people that are dumping more water into the system paying more, because they're dumping more water in the system, and that alleviates some of the burden on the folks that aren't doing that, right? Primarily single-family residents or small units. I am in favor of this. I think it's a good idea. However, what I know is that we've got all these needs, and I always think about every conversation we have about MSD in terms of rates. And I know MSD has recommended in the past that we raise rates. And so I'm trying to better understand if there's any opportunity with an impervious surface fee to address some of the either asset management or consent decree-driven projects, first of all, and that's kind of where I'm going, as they relate to keeping runoff out of the system, because ultimately that's what I think should be a goal, and I know that's one of your goals. That's kind of what I'm thinking through as I think about all this. The other thing I wonder is, I know I'm getting a little far afield, but as we always talk about rates and what's the appropriate rate. As in these scenarios, as we charge more for impervious surface, the residential customer generally is going to save money. And then we say, well, we want to roll out more projects because we're under a consent decree, and at some point, we really need to buckle under and get these projects done, and we have an aging infrastructure. Wouldn't we, in the context then of this, say, well, what rate increase would not negatively impact a residential customer who is seeing savings if we do this initiative? If we were to say, well, that rate increase is, I don't know, say 3%, and then the residential customer getting more money into the system to do all the work we need to do, but the resident isn't paying more because we restructured the system. So have you done any kind of layering? And I guess I'm asking you to do that layering to help us do that math equation if we were to implement this. Do you understand that question?
I believe so. I think, I mean, similar to the prior conversation, but that's where I probably would, Lauren and I, can consult with Black and Beach, but the way I understand it, I mean, so if we were to say we need to do more work, we're going to increase rates, it really needs to be an across-the-board rate adjustment because that ceiling has now increased, the overall cost to operate and maintain MSD, and so you would have, you'd have to have an equitable, allocation of those costs under both the sanitary sewer charge, that's what we have today, and under the wet weather impervious surface charge, which is based on billing units. So there's a rate there and there's a rate here, and I think they would both be adjusted based on a higher overall cost to, cost of MSD services. So I think where I'm struggling, and we can think on it a little bit more, is there a way to adjust rates in the future if we had the two different costs? I'm sure there would be, where we'd be increasing potentially one and not the other. I think generally, though, the idea is when you have a larger customer class and you're allocating all of the costs in a different way, you are seeing those, costs go down for some customers and costs go up for others.
Yeah, no question.
So,
And I
you're
totally
just gonna
get that.
yeah.
And just to add, just to finish out, there are obviously folks that are going to pay more, and there are folks that are going to pay less. The question is, how do we want to structure something related to that question, the question of equity in the system? And for all these years, we have not been charging the impervious surface contributors of water into the system. And so I do think, and I'm grateful for the work. I do want a big, huge shout out to the impervious surface fee task force, which has done a lot of work on a pretty confusing issue. And I want to thank them for the patience they have toughed it out through COVID and all the rest, and I know it's been really challenging. But this is a really important topic that we need to have all the stakeholders be part of. I mean, all those folks that you listed on your presentation have to be part of this conversation because the impacts are so disparate amongst those groups. And so I do want to say that there is a group here primarily those that don't have a building on a lot, of a pretty big lot, that are going to be seeing a fee where they've never seen a fee before. That's the, and I, I do think we need to think about equity in that circumstance. However, these are business owners primarily, and I do want to be sensitive to that. And I know you've got some folks that own surface parking lots on the task force. I think that's critically important because we do need to understand the impacts there. And as we measure what we can do, and maybe the scenario under which I suggested, if we want to do more work, the amount of money goes up, but how is that distributed? Maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe it's too much for that business owner to take on. But those are the kinds of questions I need to understand better in order to make a decision here, because we need to understand the impacts to the residential and the commercial and the nonprofits and the churches and the, and all the rest of us, because I see that you have not carved out, and I'm not arguing the point, but rather I do note that the only things that are carved out are things like streets and right-of-way, whatever, but not so much church parking lot or a county parking lot for that matter, or a city parking lot. So these are all things I think we need to stew on as we think about something that makes sense for everybody. So
Yeah, exactly. No, there's a lot. It's a lot, I know, so.
No, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for the presentation. Commissioner Dreehouse has outlined some important questions. From my perspective, I feel like I'm coming in from the outside in terms of I wasn't here in 2019, I was outside. And coming from the outside, I'm saying a lot of times these decisions are made on the inside. Now, yes, you have a group here, and many of these groups are in every group making decisions. But does this get to the average, everyday ratepayer? They usually don't get in until we've made a decision. I am not convinced on the impervious rate. We just here today, we all got confused. If we're confused, and you're the expert, you're in MSD all day, every day, probably 7 days a week, but you've been in it for a long time, and even you're saying, wait a minute, I'm trying to get it, it gets confusing. So what would grandma say? What would the small business who's not in the mix, they're not a member of the Greater Cincinnati Chamber or one of these organizations, they're not on the zoo board, what do we tell them? People that we've seen when I was with the 513 relief bus, a lot of people that were lined up that don't hardly even know what we're doing here, but are hoping that, we're making some very good decisions. So I'm not saying that it wasn't a good idea to look at. I'm not convinced. I think it's too complex. According to your PowerPoint, we don't make any additional money. And I'm concerned because I remember when they first went to self-serve gas at the gas pump. They said, man, if you self-serve and get rid of the person that was pumping your gas and get rid of the person that was wiping the windows for you, you're going to be able to save money. And over time, we're paying way more money. And we got rid of a job. We thought, oh, that was a great thing. So I'm not convinced that this model is the right model. Or maybe it is, but right today, I would not be able to move forward with it. I think what people are looking at, and the reason they're going equity, what we're doing now is you got the homeowners now pointing at the small businesses and the nonprofits instead of us dealing with the fact that they want their rates to go down. They don't want to pay more. So that's why they're pointing at, we're pointing, go get the business people. They got the lots. That's why your rates are go up. Go get the small business. Go get the church. They the reason. And really, they're not happy with the service that they're getting with MSD. They're not happy about rates going up. They don't want the rates to go up. And then kind of we're blaming the small business, the nonprofit, the lot owner by saying, you're dumping. They're not Mother Nature. They didn't go out there and take buckets of water and start throwing it in. Mother Nature started raining. Climate change is kicking in. And so that's why they just happen to have a lot there and it's getting in the system, but they're not out here purposely trying to go in and dump water and something. So I want to change that narrative so that we don't put the home people, because a lot of these people own businesses, they homeowners too. So they fit like both categories. A lot of the homeowners, they go to churches too. They pay tithes, and the tithes have to pay the expenses. So they're getting hit a lot of different ways. In your presentation, you talk about renters. And we've seen what's going on with landlords. Soon as something go up, they pass it on to the renter. So the renter will be paying more with this. So I agree with Commissioner Dreehouse in that we need a holistic piece that has, of course, we've got several issues, but what's the holistic component? But I think at the end of the day, what people are saying, I don't want to pay more. I think I'm paying too much already. I'm not getting service, and how can you get my costs down? And so I don't know if we make that case with this impervious. I think you've been very clear and advised us to be cautious that this may not, is not going to bring in additional money. It's really a shift component, and even with the shift, you still might get hit with the shift because you might be involved with the nonprofit or the church or the small business. You might be the small business owner. So I'm a little concerned, or you may hit with taxes through the government entities because our costs are gonna go up, the towns, the villages. We always are sensitive to the small cities in the villages. So I just wanna look at it in more of a holistic approach. I think your next step in this presentation or consultants that we're paying is to answer the questions of the bigger picture, as Commissioner Dreehouse has talked about. But also, I want to see more outreach. And I know it's hard. You know why it's hard? Because it's a tough issue. And if we can't get this issue down to apples and oranges, I'm not interested in moving forward. If it's too complex for us to understand and too complex for the everyday person to understand, either, it's real simple. Are you saving $100 or are you saving $2.50? And if you save over here, do all these renters now who are struggling and we're for affordable housing, we don't want their leases to go up? Will their leases go up? And now more of those people are now without somewhere to stay. Now it's back to us. And we're back to now raising taxes and those kind of things. We don't want to do that. And the question I always ask, if this was on the ballot, will the people vote for the impervious fee? I don't know. And that's the decision for me that I have to make. It's not about my personal decision. If this was on the ballot November 8th, would people vote for the impervious fee? I don't know. So that's what I'm trying to get more information. But this has been helpful because if we only had one meeting, I don't know if I would, this gets confusing more and more times. You've done a good job to show some of the fee structure. You've done a good job in the PowerPoint to answer the question about renters. The fee may be passed on to renters. You've done a good job in here showing that this is not bringing in additional money, it's just a shift of who pays the money. And then, but the model for the money part is kind of mucky.
Yeah.
And I need that to be more simplistic. So do homeowners really save? Is it $9? Is it $2? Is it $100? What do small businesses have to absorb? Is it now a small business going to be paying, thousands or hundreds? Those kind of things is what I'm looking for. I know it's a tough piece, but this was good. But I think next steps, you have some next steps for the consultant. You want to tell us?
Can I just tell us? So I just want to clarify, when we started all of this, it was an effort to make sure that everybody that was putting into the system was paying their part, really. This was brought to us by some advocates, as I recall, the residential advocates, KUFA for one, that was representing some of the communities that, to your point, thought that, and MSD charges are high, and they were increasing, they were increasing every year for a while there. And when we talk about who's to blame? I don't mean to use this language necessarily, but who's to blame? What's the consent decree that's to blame? I mean, it's a federally mandated program that was put in place how many years ago that we have to respond to. It was an unfunded mandate from the federal government that put is partly at fault here, because that's a consent decree. The asset management would have had to happen anyway, and the service has to happen anyway. But we were given a mandate to do all this work without any funding from the federal government, so here we are, trying to fund all this stuff locally, and that puts us in the position we're in today. So, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating, but we have to do it, and we know we have to do it, or we'll get penalized by the regulators at the federal government for not doing it. So here we are, but I do want to provide a little bit of context. I think I wasn't even here when this all started.
I don't
This was
believe
before
so.
my time.
It was, yeah.
I just learned about it as I went. That's what you get for 6 years as a county commissioner. You get to learn more about the MSD.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit. But this started probably in 16, I
Yeah,
think.
so I think that, so there was an affordability task force
That's right.
that looked at
And it
multiple
came
things.
out- yeah.
And it came out of that, and that was like 16, 17.
Right, so that
You
was
know,
even
so
before I
that's when
got
we went,
here.
like, switched from
Yeah, but, so I have a little bit of context as to the origins of it, but these stakeholders at the table, as you say, are critical, but there's nothing, and I'm not suggesting we do this right now, but there's nothing from keeping us to have public hearings about this. Once we sort through any kind of recommendation we'd like to make, we should have a public hearing about that and get folks to weigh in on what they understand that impact to be, and be very clear as to where the impacts are. I think, we're not there yet, but that seems like a natural part of this process.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, that's a good
and I appreciate that. I think where I'm coming from is that in this stakeholder, unfortunately, we're here now, so we're gonna be the ones having to deal with it unless, the next group comes in. But what I'm looking at these stakeholders. I appreciate people bring us stuff all the time, but you're gonna be hitting a lot of different types of people. And I just wanna make sure we're not going against some other policy things that we have, affordable housing. Is this going to lead to us having more people with now paying higher rents? And now it's, we do one thing, but we hurt on the other side. And the consent decree, I understand that part, but this impervious fee, is that, said we have to do an impervious fee? Because you said it's not bringing in any extra money.
We don't have to, yeah, but I mean, again,
this is
the
not a
way we
consent
charge
decree,
currently
is it?
covers the costs
Yeah,
to comply with the consent
Right,
decree.
and this doesn't bring in, but you said on here, this will not bring in any additional money. This is what your PowerPoint said.
The only thing that will bring in additional money is the board authorizing us to do more. So, we are
When you say
each
do
year
more, you
rebalancing
mean
our-
go up on the rates?
Well, just the services that we're providing. So the level of service that we provide, the projects that we're performing under a capital program, those have to be funded by the rates that we set. So, there's a whole financial analysis to determine whether the rates are increased or if we have enough
No, I
coming in.
got your point, but I want you to go all around the world on this. I want to be
Yeah.
real clear. The money you got right now, you said, because you just hit us, you said if the board lets me do more, can you do more with what you already got? Or are you asking to go up on the rates?
Right now, this is not about a rate increase.
No, I'm saying, but can you do more with what you already have without us going up on rates?
But no, we can meet the same level that we're doing
Okay,
today.
I want to make sure it's clear, because you came in and said, oh, if the board lets me do more, I'll do more. No, you saying you'll do more if we go up on the rates, and we're saying,
Correct.
at least we're trying to keep those rates.
Correct.
The people are saying they don't want you to get no more in the rates. So we're trying to balance that out. And I'm just wanting to make sure, I know you have the Archdiocese of Cincinnati and the public schools, that's a good addition, but you're missing some people. You're missing a lot of people that you don't hear from. And even if we have a town hall, by the time we had a town hall, it's either this or that. These people need to be at the table. I don't know, he don't have to be at the table, but we have a person here, a bishop, who has a church with a huge lot. And I don't think he got buckets of water he throwing out there, except for inside the church when you go down to go in the water. But no, my point is, we're leaving out too many people. And I think since we've hired these specialists, experts, it's not up to us, as Commissioner Driehaus said. We're trying to direct you all to get as many voices, as much feedback, get in your car, ride out to these places. You got staff. Go talk to the people. I want to see pictures of parking lots that you've talked to, small businesses, bowling alleys. I want to see all that and what did they have to say. Small little restaurants that's got parking lots. What did they say? That's what I'll be looking for a consultant. I'm like, look for a consultant to come on Zoom and sit in a little room and a little table, a little round table, and bring us some little facts. I'm looking for people to get out here. You talking about countywide, go out to Harrison. Go out to all these places that the bus was at, that I saw. We were in a lot of parking lots with this bus to see what do they feel. We want to be able to say, we talked to 50 churches, 100 churches that have X amount of parking lots. We talked to so many people from the apartment association. Are they going to go up on people's rates? That's what I want to see if we're going to go with this. But what you told me, I don't think achieves with Commissioner Driehaus, who I agree with. I don't think it achieves what we're trying to achieve, which is we have a demand that we got to do. We're trying to bring some money in from somewhere else somehow, and then keep that rate down on the homeowners and folks that are here and small businesses. 'Cause most of the time, people get squeezed at the little guy, the little small business. They get squeezed. They don't get a chance to get these programs that you talk about. And then every time you show up, you say, well, it doesn't meet the criteria MSD. I'm sorry. So that's what we don't want to run into. So I hope that your experts will get a little more active in the community and bring us back, as Commissioner Driehaus said, so we can see a total picture of what we're trying to achieve. So thank you.
I have two.
Oh, you got two more
well,
things? No more
I think it would be
taxes.
helpful.
No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
What
Well, one is just kind of, Commissioner Reese, your comments about the small businesses and they're not doing anything to cause to cause more runoff and more rain getting into our system in the sense, and I would agree with that, right? So I mean, obviously we are seeing more and more rainfall. The effects of that are contributing to more costs on our system and more overflows. I just want to as part of this conversation, one of the things you're saying I agree with is we want to think of everything, and so there's other. I mentioned stormwater removal program. I mean, that's something we haven't explored or presented to the board and told you possibilities. There's other tools we have, if you will, in our toolbox that we could say, how are we addressing, wet weather in our system? Another one that we have been working with the county that's been a little bit slow in terms of making progress is our current detention requirements. It's Rule 303 of our regs, and that's where when you're redeveloping or building new property, the requirements to detain stormwater. So, those are things that can impact these kind of, have similar impacts on our system, changes overall that I think we need to keep working towards. And, they're priorities of mine that I have not really brought to you and shown that, here's the next steps, here's what we'd like to do. Because I think there's more that we can do outside of, or coupled with this to really address some of these issues. So I'm kind of saying that out loud to commit us to talking about that, here in coming months, some of those other ideas. And then the other one was the consent decree being an unfunded mandate. We all know that. It is also, these compliance obligations, whether we had a consent decree back then or not, we would have the same obligations today because it is the current status of, of the regulatory environment that we're in. So some communities have it through permits, they have to meet these standards and bring their current system into compliance. But the maybe little tiny bit of good news is that there is federal funding, and you had mentioned this. There's there's always been some federal funding that comes through the state where we can access low-interest loans for our projects, for our large capital projects. There's a lot more money coming in for that state program. It's the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, and we're very actively, working and monitoring and making sure we're doing everything we can to apply for the maximum amount of money. For the most part, these are low-interest loans. This is not grant programs for wastewater. There are some possibilities to get loan forgiveness. The eligibility requirements are a little challenging, but we're very focused on that. We've been working closely with your county team, with your county financial consultants on all the opportunities out there. So that'll be part of, budgets going forward, rate setting going forward. And like, so for example, we've already nominated for 2023, 41 million worth of our projects for those state revolving loan funds to be funded through that program. So all of that helps. It's not, I wish that this funding was coming to us as grant dollars, as federal dollars to do this work versus loans. But it is a very, very good financial tool for us to help, kind of address the otherwise challenges with rates. So we can, that's something, if you want more information, happy to provide it, but it was kind of an ongoing effort that we've been working pretty closely on with your team.
So I was at a presentation of Ohio EPA, and they were talking about these loans. They did reference that some of them are forgivable loans, so I don't know what criteria you need to hit, but that would, so practically grants, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, my ears perked up. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm texting Diana, do you know? And she's like, we already got it. We're already on it. I said, okay. But the other thing that you mentioned, and I think we've talked about this before, some kind of joint meeting with stormwater.
Yeah.
So that because as you say, there are other folks working on this stuff. And so I think it would be interesting, unless you've already done it, have you had the meetings with stormwater to bring them into this conversation? Because so much of this really is work they do as well.
In the beginning of this process, yes, we had the agency group and Hamilton County and the city stormwater management utility were part of those conversations. But I do feel a little as though they're kind of, taking a back seat because we were driving this more as a fee discussion, as a MSD fee discussion versus overall, the scope of stormwater management and our roles. So, no, I think that needs a little more intentional, effort to sit down and
Because it's
really
really
try to.
both. I mean, we're talking about
Yes.
all of the above, as was mentioned earlier. So, yeah, I think it might be helpful to get stormwater in the room too and I would be curious to know what their take is on all of this too and how they can be helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very
Diane,
much for your time.
Thank you. And the other ideas that you have, new construction and charging folks for the new construction, I'm all great with that. So if you got some ideas on that. And I guess the message from us is use every tool before we go run back to the ratepayers. Thank you
Got
so
it.
much.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. All right, we have an executive session now. Make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22 G4 to discuss collective bargaining.
Second.
Commissioner Reese?
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes.